Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS Legacy. The sorority secrets of the goddess next door are revealed in this all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS Legacy in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. When people look at the dysfunctional state of American politics and American entertainment as related to people in Washington not able to maintain the government in operation or be able to create a series of successful box office movies, they see individuals like the Orange Man and the members of the Congress, or they go out here and see individuals like Kathleen Kennedy or Bob Iger at Disney. However, what's happening here is due to a culture of individuals not being taught the importance of a successor as related to the business of life. Now, when it comes down to life, life is very finite, and because people in the past knew life was finite due to God limiting man's lifespan to just 120 years, people knew that they needed to groom and train a successor in order to, one, maintain their legacy, and two, maintain the standards that they established over time. And this was something that people did in the biblical times, such as those men who God ordained with power, such as Moses. Moses was one of those men that God gave a charge to as being a steward, and part of his stewardship after delivering the Israelites out of Egypt was to go out here and choose a successor who would go out here and lead the people into the promised land after they wandered the wilderness. And the person that Moses chose and God ordained a blessing on was Joshua, and Joshua was the one who was groomed and trained for that position to take over the leadership as related to God's order and his commandment of the Israelites, and that was part of establishing that standard of grooming and training a successor. Now, another biblical example is what happened with Jesus himself, the Son of God. The Son of God basically knew he was sent down to earth in order to die to pay the sin debts of all mankind. And as he was again sent here to do that work, he wanted to make sure that the work of the gospel being spread and a church being established was done. And again, this is where he prepared and trained his disciples and individuals like the Apostle Paul to take that charge as related to their stewardship. Now, this was again something that was part of world culture ever since the days of the Bible, that you always made sure that you had a successor, an individual who was taught your culture, taught your heritage, taught the history and the value of whatever institution you had, and taught that this was important to your business. Usually this was done in the old times with people like heirs. And this again is what I'm going to go back to another one of my videos where I talked about the importance of a name. Again, back in those days, again, a name was important because that person was going to carry on not only the legacy, but the standards of that person in whatever business or government institution they were going to establish. And again, this is why firstborn sons were important, and it's related to their name being the father's name in many cases. So when it came down to people, they knew again that they were going to die, and with them dying, again, they wanted to make sure that the quality of life was continuing to be maintained. The standards of whatever institution they had established would be maintained. The culture and traditions would be maintained. And in order to do that, they went out here and groomed individuals to be their successors because they knew they were going to die. And as they got older, they knew they could not continue on with that venture, whether it was a business, whether it was a government institution. They knew that they could not do this in their older age. So as they were working on whatever they were working on, they were looking to find individuals who had drive or passion, or go out here and groom a son and train and prepare them to take over their business, to one, continue to maintain their legacy, and to continue to maintain the standards of whatever they established. They always look to groom successors to take over, because they knew one day that they were not going to be here, but they wanted to make sure that others would be taken care of in the future, and that their lives and the quality of life, their lives, would not go into decline. This is why they would go out here and again look to choose a successor who they know would be competent in maintaining the standards of whatever they established, and choose a successor who would go out here and look to continue to maintain the traditions and standards that they had been taught. This was something that men knew they needed to do up until about the 21st century and the late 20th century. Now, what happened here is that a lot of people, basically because rich people wanted to break up the American family, didn't learn about the importance of the tradition of successors. No, when America's rich people wanted to go out here and destroy the American family, they thought they were going to make more money as related to things, as related to having the woman be out here in the workforce and the father not being in the home. Unfortunately, what they didn't understand is that God had established the whole concept of successors as part of his patriarchal order. And without a actual successor, what happens is that your whole country's culture and your whole business's institutions culture starts to fall off, because there's nobody there groomed to maintain that culture or maintain those standards, because no one was taught that these things were valuable at all. And that's why America's whole culture is a mess right now, because the rich people in the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s decided, hey, we don't need any fathers in the home. No, we don't need any sort of family structure. We don't need any sort of family unit where traditions are passed on. And now we are reaping what we sowed, greater than what we sowed, later than what we sowed, as related to the American culture, reaping what we sowed, later than what we sowed, greater than what we sowed, because now many of these institutions are basically falling apart, and our government in and of itself has become extremely dysfunctional. All of this dysfunction basically started to happen, I surmise, with the baby boomer generation, a generation of people who basically were given everything, and as they were given everything except the values of America, they basically have become a generation of extremely complacent people, a generation of extremely complacent people who take their lives for granted, and take their lives for granted because they were not taught the traditions of family or taught their role as successors. And because these people were not taught their roles as successors, basically everything is chaos right now in American business. That's what's happening with American business and our government, in that you don't have competent individuals in a line of succession, and without competent individuals who understand their role in a line of succession, what happens is that you don't get your traditions maintained, you don't get your culture maintained, you don't get your values maintained, and what happens is that other individuals start bringing their ideas and into the forefront, And that's what's been happening right now. That's been leading to a lot of this chaos and dysfunction going on in American business and American government. We did not train any successors. Now, if we look at politics, we see after George W. Bush, we got nobody trained to being groomed to be a successor. This is how Barack Obama came to power, because there was a void in both the blue and the red parties, because those baby boomers, again, did not train or groom any successors on as related to the blue and the red party. And this is where we got this serious decline as related to the state of our government and the state of the union. We got this decline because nobody was groomed to be a successor. No one was really groomed and prepared because, again, the baby boomer generation and part of the silent generation took their existence in America for granted, and they took their positions in America for granted because the rich people basically broke up the family, and without the family there to be able to maintain traditions and culture, and again have the father teach the son about his role as a man in the family and take on that role of succession. Again, a role of succession as related to stewardship, where you understand your responsibility as a man and a woman. What happens is that since nobody is there to take on the role of succession, this is where you get upstarts and opportunists who come in and take these positions of power, because the people who were supposed to take those positions either didn't want to take those positions, or they weren't aware of how important these positions were, because this is what happens in some companies. The son will sell the company off because he doesn't think it's important, not understanding that this company is his family's legacy. And again, the whole legacy falls apart because nobody's there to take on the line of succession. And succession is important because in order to, again, maintain a quality as related to things, you have to have a line of succession. And this is something that, again, is a God-established standard, because God himself, again, did establish this standard with Moses in the wilderness before the Israelites came to the promised land, again, in order to make sure that the Ten Commandments and, again, the line that led to Jesus could go on. There had to be successors, as related to maintaining that line. Again, Joshua was given that charge after being trained and prepared for this. And the same thing happened after Jesus came to earth. After Jesus came to earth, he then gave that charge to those disciples as related to spreading the gospel, gave that charge to the disciples as related to spreading the gospel, and they were given that charge, again, the line of succession. Somebody has to take over, somebody has to take responsibility. But in today's America, many people basically look to forsake their responsibility, and they don't take their positions very seriously. And because they don't take their positions very seriously, this is why America is a mess right now. Again, as related to its politics, again, nobody prepares people to take on lines. I mean, in order for many businesses to go on, like I'll give you an example with wrestling, you have families that go on, like the Rhodes family with Dusty Rhodes and his sons, Dustin and Cody. You have the Orton family with Bob Orton and Randy Orton. You have the entire bloodline was related to Roman Reigns and guys like Jimmy and Jay Uso. They understand their roles inside of these families in maintaining a standard as related to wrestling. They understand their roles as related to maintaining the standing of their families. And again, they groom their children at an early age to enter the business, again, because they want to continue maintaining their reputation and their line. This is something that, again, has not been taught as a culture here in America for many years, and this is why the country is falling apart. as related to the so-called culture wars. You lost your culture because you let rich people tell you, oh, you don't need this family. You don't need these familial institutions as related to God's patriarchy. You don't need these things. No, you can go out here and have the woman be out here. And again, as she's out here, she's not taught her role as a helpmeet. She's not taught her role in supporting a man as related to his family. And sadly, the children aren't groomed or prepared for their role in a family business, or groomed and taught as related to things. And that's why there's no standards being maintained as related to our movies anymore, because as related to things, because we don't have any executives who again taught this culture to the next generation of executives. Again, nobody taught the entire business of Hollywood to people. That's why we're not getting any movies. I mean, the Telecom Act of 1996 was a disaster because people didn't understand, again, the role of risk in Hollywood, because Hollywood is a risk-based business, and anyone who has been a part of that business understands risk. But these new people who came in from these upstarts from Silicon Valley, they don't understand risk. They think you can put $100 million in a movie and get an instant hit, when that's never been the case. But they would have understood this if you understood tradition. Again, when you have successors, they understand what they're doing because they're usually taught on the job. They're taught hands-on. They're taught how things are supposed to work. They're taught how things are supposed to be. That's what happens when you have successors. Successors, again, pass the business and the culture of the business on, pass the standards on. But sadly, here in America, people sit there and wonder, oh, why aren't things working? Well, they're not working because, again, you had this boomer generation that basically wasn't looking for its successors. No, these people are now in their 70s and their 80s, and they didn't go to Gen X, they didn't go to millennials, they didn't go to Gen Z looking for a successor. No, they just sat there and thought, I'm going to stay in this job until I die. And again, that's not what was ever meant to be whatsoever. It was never meant for you to sit in a job until you died. It was meant for you to sit in this job and be able to maintain those standards until qualified individuals could come and take that position over. It was always meant that it was a time for someone to retire, someone to step aside so that you could, again, maintain those standards. But sadly, with these baby boomers, they're very selfish, they're very greedy, and as they participated in their greed that was taught to them by the previous generation of rich people, they basically were looking to maintain their spots, not understanding your spots would never be permanent. No, your spot would never be permanent. And with your spot not being permanent, there's nobody there to fill that spot. And this is where we get this culture of what you call woke. But what they call woke is inexperienced individuals taking on positions of power that they were not trained for, or opportunists taking on positions that they were not trained for, like Zoran Mamdani, the new mayor of New York. These are inexperienced individuals, and again, you have inexperienced individuals who are going to make messes because they were not taught about the line of succession. When you're not taught about succession and how important it is, guess what? You're going to have chaos because this person doesn't know how things work. That's what's happening right now in places like Hollywood. In Hollywood, you have people like Kathleen Kennedy trying to ice skate uphill, trying to shoehorn characters like Rey into the Star Wars lore instead of looking at what was presented to her in the past with things like the expanded universe. Again, the opportunity to, again, bring Star Wars back was always there, but because of the way this woman did things, she basically destroyed everything because she wasn't understanding the importance of succession, and George Lucas didn't understand the importance of succession when he sold Lucasfilm. Again, when you create an institution, you just can't sell it off. No, you have, in order to maintain that standard, you have to have successors. And again, What's happening here is what happens when you don't have successors. I can say the same thing about Marvel. Marvel had no successor from Stan Lee, and one successor they had in Jim Shooter they fired, and ever since then the company fell off because, again, when you don't have a successor to maintain standards, you have nobody to pass the culture on, and that's why everything is a mess right now in government, in business, here in America. We walked away from the God standard of a succession, and that's why nothing is successful. In order to maintain success, you have to have a successor. You have to have someone trained and ready to take that position of power and be trained to understand what to do. And again, we haven't groomed or prepared these individuals, and that's why our country is a mess right now, because people don't understand succession. They don't understand the role of succession in maintaining standards. They don't understand the role of maintaining standards as related to succession, and that's why nothing is successful in this country. Now, if you want to pick up some of my books on the SJS Direct imprint, you can find those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft to Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS: Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS: Revenge of the Cyber Goddess featuring a bonus pin-up and the other 2 books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online booksellers everywhere today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, 1987. Learn lessons about life and teenage love in the 1980s in this coming-of-age John Haynes story. Get your copy of John Haynes, 1987 in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.